Found out something again. Again, I think that we already knew. The terrorists are winning. And it looks like the terrorists are winning because the House has canceled all of their sessions for Thursday because there is a possible plot to breach the Capitol. Because as we know, tomorrow is supposed to be Donald Trump's inauguration day. This is supposed to be the day where the rise of the phoenix out of the ashes of... You get the point. This is supposed to be the day that Donald Trump is inaugurated because we're going back to the way it used to be. Because before Roosevelt was president, March 4th was the day. So the Q folks and the Trumpkins, evidently, this is how they're visioning this. Evidently, they see this possibly going to happen. And this is one of those weird moments for me because I'm like, what happened to that mindset of, well, we can't let the terrorists win? What happened to that? Do you remember it? Remember when we used to be, defiant as a country? To say, we don't negotiate with terrorists and we don't let them win. The Q kooks are shutting our government down. I guess all they have to do now is threaten something. Put a threat out there and somebody will believe it. And then we shut things down. And I'm thinking, isn't this why we pay the Capitol Police? Isn't this why we had the big fences? Isn't this why you got the National Guard? Isn't this why you've got, doors with locks on them? Isn't this the reason we do a lot of the stuff we did? Isn't this the reason we fought that whole war in Iraq so we could play with toys to deal with crowd control? Isn't this, with the cannons, sound cannons, and the goodbye guns and the, all that stuff? Isn't that what this was supposed to do? The guys on horses and people with tanks and all that. Weren't we supposed to keep the lights on no matter what? What kind of message does this send? I mean, it's truly insane. What kind of message does it send when we're just going to go, I think we're going to close down today. I think we're just going to shut it all down and don't worry about it. We'll be fine. Just shut her down. It's crazy, just crazy to me. But I guess this is the brave new world we're in, where I guess now the terrorists get to win. Is that what this is? And now understand what the optics here. Well, we can't have a bunch of white guys dressed up in costumes, with their guns and stuff coming to the Capitol because evidently they think there's somehow going to be a breach. And it would look bad on TV if you actually shot them in the street like the traitors that they are. That somehow the optics would be bad. And personally, this is one of those things where I keep going, where's Rick Santorum? You remember when he was running around saying, you got to say Islamo-fascist? Well, where is he with the Christo-fascist stuff? Because we got a lot of crazy religious Christian folks with guns who believe somehow that they're, going to storm the Capitol and install Donald Trump as president. I mean, it's really crazy. And to be honest, if I'm the leader of the Democratic Party, there is no way. If I'm a representative or a senator, I'm sorry, there is no way you are kicking me out of the people's house. It just ain't happening. I would stand on the Capitol steps tomorrow. That simple. You cannot give these cowards this kind of victory. This is just bad. And this is, again, why, and I come back to this mindset of, why the Democrats have lost the white working class of this country. It is this kind of, instead of balling up your little digits and getting in there and throwing some punches and saying, no, you're not going to scare us off. You're not going to run us away. We're going to stand and we're going to fight this. Jeez, oh man, it's crazy. Who made this choice? Well, it was the Capitol Police. I don't care who made the choice. If I'm the elected leader, you are not going to keep me from the floor. You're not going to keep me from making my statement. It's just crazy. But hey, I guess we're in a different time. And yesterday we found out that there was no Antifa in the crowd on January 6th? Nothing. All the people in the mob were fully Trump people, absolutely. And again, knew that from the start. Knew it from the start. Today, we find out what we already knew, that the delayed response on January 6th was deliberate. And yeah, absolutely, we need to fully investigate and all that stuff. But when Michael Flynn's brother is part of this, immediately my radar goes up. So today you had Major General William Walker, the commanding general of the D.C. National Guard. He told lawmakers on the Senate's Rules Committee and its Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee that it was, well, the restrictions that the Pentagon had put on him, because it would look bad if we had a whole bunch of National Guard surrounding a bunch of white folk, waving their Confederate flags. Somehow that'd be bad optics. And that it was the slow decision-making by the chain of command that stopped him from moving more quickly. And you went through the testimony, and I read as much as I could on it. I'm like, okay, it's, we get it. No one gave you the order. There's part of me that goes, if you're in that position, you got to make the call. And I get the chain of command thing. I know you've never been in the military. You don't understand. I know I don't. But there's a moment where you go, we're in the middle of something that's unprecedented, something that's never happened in our country before, where a group of criminals are storming our Capitol, looking for our elected leaders and looking to hang them. I think you got to get those people there faster than 3 hours and 19 minutes. Just kind of one of those thoughts. But that was kind of the testimony. And look, are we going to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th? I sure hope so. I sure hope we find these people, we bring them. I mean, at this point, it's like, I guess they've a little more than 300 people they've arrested. Twitter went and canceled like 70,000 people's Twitter accounts. We should be moving faster, and we should be doing more public perp walks. We should be making more of a display of this. And this idea that, and I go back to the interview I had yesterday with Stephen Donziger, who's been under house arrest for over a year and a half, under a bond greater, $800,000 bond, which is greater than most of the people that we've arrested for insurrection. I mean, stop and think about it. Now, all he did was tell a judge, no, I'm not going to give you my cell phone and my computer that has all my clients' information on it. No, I'm not going to do that. That's what he did. Actually upheld the rule of law, actually willing to fight on a principle. But the people who kicked down the doors, smashed the windows, defecated on our floor, leaked on our desks, stole things from our government offices, they, he's a family man. We're gonna let him go. Let him go back to his family. Absolutely insane. Plain crazy. But I guess this is where the world that we're in. Today, evidently, as we're moving forward on the American Rescue Plan, the Biden administration has agreed to eligibility limits. It's still going to be $1,400 for people making, the $75,000 and $150,000 for a couple. I guess it's going to cut off at $80,000 and $160,000. That it's going to end instead of going up to $200,000, and that's the compromise. And okay, that's you got to do what you got to do. Just as long as we start getting this moving. It's something that has to happen. It has to happen soon, because look, there's some pretty big things happening very soon. The unemployment is going to end. The foreclosure moratorium is ending. People need the resources to stay in their homes. People need the resources to feed their kids, because we're so close. This is one of those things that I was talking about yesterday. We're so close to kind of getting through this. We're so close, and you've got states like Mississippi and Texas going, no, fling the doors open. You go right on ahead. Let's make it worse just before it could have been better. And we did this the last time. we were ticking down, and all of a sudden we had to have the crybabies and the whiners have their displays and go out and do the super spreader events, and then boom, it ticked back up. And here we are in that moment again where you go, you're so close, so close. I'm hoping we get the vaccine out faster, because we're our own worst enemy. But it's going to be interesting to see how quickly they can get this rescue plan passed. If it gets through the Senate, we'll see, and then get the things that we need out, and save our local community, save our state governments, save our local governments, because this year and next, really, there's going to be a correction and a collapse, and that is a bad thing. Seriously a bad thing. But today, as we speak, there's the possibility of H.R. 1, the Voting Rights, the For the People Act, being passed this evening. And look, I think it's going to pass the House. Pretty simple. I think that's going to happen. It doesn't stand a snowball's chance in the Senate, because there aren't going to be any Republicans who are going to come on with this. This is turned into a political football, and it's one of these moments where you go, when did allowing people to vote become as divisive as we are right now? And this is very party line vote. This is, Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other. And I'm in this place where I'm going, why the fighting? We want to make sure that everyone gets to vote. No? Well, a lot of my Republican friends say no. We have to have these strict rules. And we have to have a photo ID, and we have to have signatures, and we have to do it on a Tuesday, and we have to do all of these things, because that's the way we've always done it. And you go, well, if you've always done it wrong, well, maybe it's now time to open it up. And look, I'm a big fan of mail-in voting. I'm a big fan of early voting. The fact that you have to stand in line, and in some places, especially poor areas, which we seem to allow this to happen a lot, especially in poor areas, waits can be 2, 3, 4, in some places 10 hours long. And the reality is, how many people are going to stand there and wait that entire time? Far too many do, but how many people walk away? Which is why the biggest voting bloc are the ones that don't vote. So what we need to do is we need to make it more inclusive. We need to open it up. We need to do all of the above. When I voted this last time around, I requested a mail-in ballot. They sent it to me. Came to my house. I filled it out, put it in the little secret envelope, signed the secret envelope, put the secret envelope in the envelope, sealed that up nicely. Did the little signature on the back of that thing there it is. There's my thing. And I drove it over to the elections office, dropped it in a box. Next day, I got an email. Hey, got your ballot. Thanks. And then when they counted, I got another one saying, hey, ballots have been counted. All good. We have the technology to do this stuff. And opening it up to people to register early, opening it up to people to make it simpler to vote earlier and to register and all of that stuff seems like a good idea to me. I said, a while ago, I remember when I turned 18, the first thing I had to go and do, and I had to by mandate of law, as an 18-year-old male, I had to go to the post office, and I had to register for selective service. If there's ever a draft, they need to know where I am. I don't know why I wasn't handed a voter registration card right there and then. And also, I don't know why I wasn't immediately registered by that document itself. They knew who I was. They said I have to be there. So this is the craziness. And I hear the conservatives whining and complaining, well, they're going to send out multiple registrations and there'll be people registered on multiple different, databases and all that. And you go, but here's the thing. When you set up a system where everyone, gets their mail-in ballot and is registered in a smart, comprehensive way, it doesn't matter how many ballots you get. It doesn't matter how many times you're registered. It matters how many times you vote. And this was one of those weird moments that you go, yeah, okay, maybe you got 2 ballots. Did you send them both in? No. Well, why not? Because I go to jail. Exactly. That seems pretty simple. Don't do it. So for me, the idea of opening up more access for people to vote early more access for people to use any means they can to get their voice heard and be part of the system, for me, is a good thing. And that's what H.R. 1 does. It does the automatic voter registration. It does some restoration of felons' rights. Once they get out of jail, they get the ability to win their vote back. It's a bunch of stuff, voting by mail, enhanced early balloting, modernize our antiquated system, tons of stuff. And more importantly, restore the Voting Rights Act. Thanks to the Supreme Court, we've had that just ripped to shreds. So much we need to be doing. And sadly, it's not going to get done. So what's going to happen, the next election and the next election? We're going to continue to have these fights over someone was cheated, someone feels angry. I mean, even to this point, you've got Donald Trump still running around saying that he was cheated, that all this fraud was going on, that the Republicans now are the enemy because they didn't take their treason far enough. I mean, it's quite remarkable. But I'm hoping this is a good time to have these conversations. It's a good time to talk about, hey, how do we make our ballots more secure? How do we ensure that there isn't any cheating? How do we open it up to everyone? And more importantly for me, how do we find out where the money is coming from? For me, that's the sad reality, because you look overwhelmingly, things that are popular, like raising the minimum wage, not a snowball's chance. Why? Big money doesn't want it. There's a part of me that goes, if the people who are voting on this stuff were concerned about us voting them out, maybe they'd listen a little more. So there's some stuff in that. There's some ethics oversight. There's some things on gerrymandering. There's a lot to this, and a lot of really great opportunities to secure our ballot box. Just seems like a good start for me. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Tiffany Muller is going to be here to share some thoughts on H.R. 1 and what we need to do. Stick around.
American, then workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. National headlines spread fear of the growing wildcat strikes at Chrysler and Briggs auto plants in Detroit. The Wildcats had increased to 35,000 strikers and idled workers at 2 Chrysler plants and 7 Briggs plants. The strike wave started a week earlier at the Dodge main plant in Detroit. 8 of the union's best leaders had been discharged for refusing to go along with a production line speed up. Briggs management followed Chrysler's union-busting campaign by firing 7 UAW officers at the Mack Avenue plant. 3 days later, Briggs fired another 8 committeemen and stewards, which then provoked the walkout. Company officials and the War Labor Board were outraged at the halt in war production of tanks, B-29 Superfortresses, anti-aircraft guns, rockets, and trucks. The Michigan legislature introduced a bill to define as a felony any strike participation that violated a labor relations contract. The War Labor Board demanded that both sides meet in Washington to end the walkout. Strike leaders defied the wartime no-strike pledge and ignored the international's threat of disciplinary action. Strikers had the full backing of local UAW presidents. The UAW conceded that management had provoked the wildcatting through indiscriminate firings. Workers argued that if the War Labor Board prioritized production over union busting, they would order the reinstatement of all the discharged leaders. The Flint Labor Council passed a resolution demanding that all CIO and other union representatives resign immediately from the War Labor Board. It considered the board as stacked against labor. Workers at Chrysler and Briggs would soon end their walkout with guarantees of arbitration for reinstatement of the fired militants.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like Mike Pence is at work. Didn't take long. Heritage Foundation putting him to work. He's got an op-ed out on their website, the Daily Signal. And again, it's one of these, he's full in. He is full into they stole it. He's full into it's all bad. We can't do any of these kind of liberal Democrat reforms like letting people vote. Can't possibly do that. And look, I'm not surprised by him at all. But I find it interesting that he threw out that we're going to let felons vote the second they step foot out of prison. And I'm like, yeah, what's wrong with that? They did their time. I'm okay with restoring their rights. Why do you think they shouldn't be there, Mike? And maybe, who knows? After we investigate January 6th, you might need yours restored. But here to share some thoughts on H.R. 1 and what the chances of getting this through are, I've asked Tiffany Muller to come talk with us. Tiffany is the president of End Citizens United and also the president of Let America Vote. Tiffany, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks so much for having me on tonight, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Mike Pence says this is unconstitutional. We can't do any of it. It's all bad.
Yeah, Mike Pence is just wrong, right? Like, these are common sense reforms. Let's talk about what this bill actually does. So it does 4 really simple things. It makes it easier, not harder to vote by making sure folks can vote by mail without having to have an excuse, that we can have early voting. To your point, that people who have served their time can have their voting rights restored, and that we help people register to vote. So all the things to make it easier, not harder to vote. It stops the partisan gerrymandering and map manipulation and actually puts in independent redistricting. It ends the dominance of big money in politics. It makes sure we have disclosure and transparency in our campaign funding and spending. And it says, look, if you're going to be a public official, you should make sure you're serving the public good, not your own good. And so it puts in a lot of anti-corruption measures, like if you want to be president, you have to disclose your tax returns. The 83% of people like this bill, including 74% of Republicans. You want to know why Mike Pence doesn't like it? It's the same reason Mitch McConnell doesn't like it, because they think the more people that vote, the less elections they can win. And it really is that simple.
No, it is that simple. But in his piece, he writes out, people like you, leftists like you only want people powerless at the ballot box. They want to silence and censor anyone who would dare criticize their unconstitutional power grab. It's all bad. It's all bad, Tiffany.
Except who's the ones who right now have 253 bills in 43 states to roll back voting rights?
Right.
That's not Democrats. That's Republicans who are continuing to spread lies about what happened in the 2020 election, which we know was accurate, secure, fair. And now they're using that to go push to keep people from actually being able to access the ballot box, right? And they're not even keeping quiet about it. They're saying the quiet parts out loud. Just yesterday in court, they said, well, look, if these voting restrictions aren't held up and more people can vote, then Republicans can't win elections. That's their main concern.
Yeah, maybe come up with better ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Go actually have to win those voters over rather than keeping them from participating in our democracy. Whereas what we say is, look, our system's based on one voice, one vote. And that's what this bill does. It gives power back to the people. It takes it away from the special interests, away from the big donors, away from those who would keep folks from being able to vote. And that's what it does. It really is that simple.
Let's talk about the money, because money in politics have been the end for a very long time. Citizens United wasn't the end, but it was the beginning. And the amount of money that's gone into these races has created an environment where, as you said, this bill is overwhelmingly popular, as is a $15 an hour minimum wage, as is the rescue plan that President Biden has, as is, we can go down the list, as, healthcare, national health care, all of those things. And yet somehow the voice of the people never gets heard and none of this stuff ever gets passed. Yet overwhelmingly, the majority of us want these things. And it comes down to, who they know which side the bread the butter's on.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what it's about. I mean, look, our name is End Citizens United. We think it was the most disastrous Supreme Court decision in our lifetime. And for your listeners who don't know, it did 2 really simple things. It said corporations are people and money equals speech. And it unleashed a just flood of money into our politics. And so prior to Citizens United, there had been about $750 million in outside spending spent to influence our elections, which is a lot of money. But in the 10 years since, it's been $7.5 billion. It's increased tenfold in just 10 short years. And look, all that does is drown out the voice of the people. And to your point, right, like all of these things that we know are incredibly popular, background checks on guns, right? 95% of Americans want it. But for too long, the NRA and big money, gun lobby money has been controlling that. We know we have a climate change problem and that we need to address that. And yet, since Citizens United, not a single Senate Republican has been willing to address the issue because the oil and gas lobby puts in so much campaign money. Let's take Big Pharma. They put in hundreds of millions of dollars into elections every single campaign season. But you know what? Their return on investment is huge because they got a $76 billion tax cut in the 2017 Republican tax cut bill. But did your prescription drug prices go down? Because I know mine didn't.
Nope.
And I don't think they did for most people. And that's exactly what we're talking about, is that the people's voice is supposed to matter in Congress and in Washington, D.C. And right now, too much money is setting the policy and it's setting the agenda and the outcomes. And so that's what this bill does. It actually breaks that connection so that we can begin to address all the other big priorities that we have before us.
Yeah,
even with COVID relief, my last example, even with COVID relief, Mitch McConnell was happy to quickly approve a $500 billion slush fund to help out the big corporations. But getting $2,000 checks to American families who are suffering has been just a Herculean task and taken almost a year to do. And that's why we have to change this system.
No, I'm right there with you. But, you know, when you look at this, and the amount of money, it's just in the obscenity of the amount of money. And then all of these dark groups, all of this dark money that goes around, these super PACs who have these wonderfully euphemistic names like Americans for Dogs and Puppies, who are just spewing the most vile stuff, basically doing the bidding of a handful of people who have a ton of money. We've got to open that up and expose it. Look, I'm in favor of people having their right to have to say things, but I want to know who's saying it.
No, absolutely. And we know, so in HR 1, there's the Disclose Act, and it says if you are an organization who spends more than $10,000 to influence our elections, we have to know who's funding you, right? And so all of those dark money groups, Americans for Better Puppies, to your point, they have to disclose who's funding them. And what we've seen in states that have implemented this is that not only could we then have accountability and actually trace back where that money was coming from, but the other thing it did is some of these people don't want us to know that they're putting money in, which means some of that money actually goes out of the system. That's a good thing. And the other thing that this bill does is it actually stops the coordination between candidates and these super PAC groups. We know that that's happening all the time. And right now it's not being enforced. So this actually cracks down on that coordination and gives the Federal Election Commission some real teeth to enforce the law.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that we don't have strong election regulation, and especially when you're talking about the amounts of money. Personally, I'm someone who believes in publicly financed elections. I loved Andrew Yang's idea of freedom dollars and the ability of average everyday people to give small donations to people that would have matching. I think that's a way forward, and capping the amount money can be spent. I would love to see corporate money completely outlawed like it had been at the beginning of our country. There's so many things we can be doing to bring that down. Free airtime on radio and TV, because, hey, they are the public's airwaves after all. I seem to remember that. There's so much we could and should be doing, and the big money people don't want it.
That's right. And this bill actually does include a small dollar donor matching system. And guess what? You're going to love this. You are going to love this. It's not even paid for with taxpayer dollars. It's paid for by fining corporations who break the law. So think of it this way, like BP oil spill was fined for the damage that they caused to our country. There's a small surcharge that goes on top of that fine that actually funds the small dollar donor matching system. And to your point, that kind of public financing actually opens the door so that regular people can run for office. Right now, 50% of Congress are millionaires, right? They don't know what it's like to have to worry about paying the rent or getting their prescription drugs covered, right? And so we need more women candidates, more candidates of color, more working class candidates to be able to run. And this is how we're going to do it. And on top of that, it even more than pays for itself and helps bring down the deficit. It is good policy. It is good politics. We need to get it done.
Now, my conservative friends say, well, you fall down on this, Tiffany, because you don't have term limits. And I'm someone who believes that we already have term limits. That's why I go to vote. Are you guys in favor of hard term limits?
Yeah, we're like you. We think that there's term limits for the House of Representatives every 2 years, right? They have to stand and face their voters. At the same time, I want to eliminate some of the structural things that have been put into place that currently rig the system and make so many of these seats not competitive, right? Like the gerrymandering that we've seen. We need to actually make sure we have fair maps so that voters are picking their elected officials and not the other way around. And, getting the big money out, making sure everyone can vote. All of these things should make our elections both more competitive and drive real cooperation in Congress.
No, absolutely something we should do. And, I look at my senatorial district is one of the most bizarre looking that I've seen in a while. And I keep asking, how did we dream this one up? How did we dream this kid, all bent over like the kid who does the peeing on things with a bad case of gas? How did you draw that up? How did you figure out? Because I live in the gas cloud of the 30th senatorial district here in Pennsylvania, and it makes me laugh every time I see it. But here are people with creative pencils, because when you know the area, you know why they chose what they did and how they carved each district to make sure it had the right balance so that they could keep their people in.
Well, and right there, I love that story. There's a district in Texas that we actually call the Terrier because it's Colin Allred's district. It actually looks, it's shaped in the shape of a dog. But absolutely, you're right. It's about keeping people packed into districts or cracking them out of districts in order to lessen their voice and lessen their power. And, right there in Pennsylvania, there's already been at least 14 different bills introduced to further roll back voting rights, to further disenfranchise people. And at the same time, they're pushing something right now to actually put gerrymandering into your Supreme Court so that instead of having Supreme Court members elected at large in Pennsylvania, that they would be running in districts that the legislature drew to flip your court.
Yep.
I mean, they are just going all out right now. And we know the people are on our side. So we have to raise our voices and keep pushing and keep fighting. And it's a big day today. HR 1 is being voted on in the House here in just about an hour, and it'll pass out of the House and go over to the Senate. But we have to put pressure on all of our elected officials to get this done and make sure we strengthen our democracy.
Yeah, I don't see a snowball's chance, and where of this passing. But I think it's important to have these conversations, and the reason we have these conversations is to push back against what Republicans are doing in our legislatures across this country. Because you're right, they're doing everything they can do to rig the election while screaming, "They're rigging the election!" It's that kind of projection that you expect from children. But that's what they've been masters at, and it's what Trump was brilliant at. I give Trump credit for some things. That kind of projection, accusing everyone else of doing what he's doing, masterful.
And it throws people off their game, right? And look, I think that we will invite and welcome any Republicans who want to join us on this. But I don't think you're wrong. I think that we are seeing right now that they are choosing the opposite side of strengthening our democracy. They're choosing the side of attacking our democracy even more. But I think that we can't be complacent about the final outcome, because we know that we have the people on our side. We know that we have the issue on the politics on our side. And there have been other times when we have organized enough, we have changed the outcome, right? 2017 is a good example to me. The Republicans had the trifecta. The first thing they were going to do was repeal the Affordable Care Act. And the only reason they didn't was because we all organized and raised our voices loud enough. And so we're going to fight and we're going to try, and we're not going to leave anything on the table. Right. And so for all of your listeners, we need your help.
And by doing that, you can go to endcitizensunited.org, one of your websites, and the other one is letamericavote.org. We'll get links out on social media how folks can take a look at that. But I want to go back real quick to the Senate vote, because sadly this is another one of those moments where Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, and this "we can't end the filibuster" causes us to move really great legislation out of the House. things that would really help people, things that would make things more fair and equal, only to die in the need of a supermajority in the Senate. And yes, I know down the road it'll bite us, but this is how democracy is supposed to work. We shouldn't have a supermajority every time we want to move a piece of legislation.
We agree. We think that we should not be in a system where one person can block what the American people want. And right now, that's what Mitch McConnell is doing, right? He's spent the last 10 years obstructing, and we've already seen how much he's obstructing in this new Congress. And we know the people are with us. And so we're activating our 4 million members across the country. We're going to put pressure on members of Congress. We're going to put pressure on Republican members to make sure that they know they're out of step with their voters, and make sure that they understand how powerful this issue is. But this is too important of legislation, and it's too early to rule out anything. The bottom line is this bill is too popular and it needs to pass no matter what. So we're not taking anything off the table yet.
And the thing is it's right. I mean, this is where, you go through the arguments of, well, we can't open up early voting. Why not? Why is it that we have to only vote on a Tuesday at a certain spot? I tell the story all the time. I voted first time, really vote by mail. I requested the ballot. They sent it to me. I sent it back. They sent me an email, said, hey, we got it. Nice job. Simple,
it's super
quick,
easy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone should have the right and the ability to do that without an excuse and a notary and witness signatures and all the other things they're trying to put into place. And that's another thing HR 1 does. It says, look, you can vote by mail, no excuse needed, no matter where you live.
Yeah, but that's the problem. It encourages people to vote. And as you've said from the beginning, it's the only way Republicans are going to be able to win elections. And this goes back to 1980 with Paul Wayrick, the founder of the Heritage Foundation, who said, we don't want everybody to vote. Our leverage goes up as the voting populace goes down. And that's been their game plan from 1980 all the way to today. Tiffany, I appreciate the time. Hope folks will check out the websites and citizensunited.org and letamericavote.org. We'll get links out. But Tiffany, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me on tonight.
Good stuff. Tiffany Muller. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that William Greene, longtime president of the American Federation of Labor, was born in Coshocton, Ohio. Greene's family were English and Welsh immigrant miners. He entered the mines at the age of 16. Before he was 20, he had become secretary of the Coshocton Progressive Miners Union. That local would eventually join the United Mine Workers of America. By 1906, Greene had risen to lead the Ohio chapter of the UMWA. Less than 2 decades later, when longtime leader of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, died, Greene was named his successor. Greene believed in union management cooperation. He thought labor could win more gains at the table with management than they could standing in opposition. Greene helped secure some major legislative victories for labor, including the 1935 National Labor Relations Act, which strengthened collective bargaining rights. He also supported the Fair Labor Standards Act, which established the 40-hour workweek and the minimum wage. His tenure at the helm of the AFL was during some of the most tumultuous years in U.S. labor history. This was an era of massive sit-down strikes and organizing drives for workers in industries like steel, meatpacking, and the auto industry. Greene supported organizing industrial workers, but the AFL's leadership at the time, by and large, favored skilled trade labor. Increasingly, Greene clashed with UMWA President John L. Lewis over the question of industrial unions. This led to a split in the labor movement and the formation of the separate Congress of Industrial Organizations. Greene continued to lead the AFL until his death in 1952. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So for the last couple of days, been promoting the clip of Joe Biden saying, "Look, you vote for a union if you want to. Don't let the employers talk you out of it. Don't let them harass and intimidate you." And I'll tell you, that was in my lifetime as I said yesterday, the most important statement a president has said to a working person in my lifetime. And good on Joe Biden, and exactly the reason that I voted for him. Now it's going to be interesting to see if that causes a spark, that people finally go, hey, maybe it's okay. Maybe we don't have to hide. Maybe we don't have to be afraid. Maybe we can now come out and say, yes, we demand better treatment. And the question is organized labor back? Are they coming back? And here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked Timothy Noah to come talk with us. Timothy's a columnist for the New Republic. He's got a piece out, oddly enough, titled, "Is Organized Labor Coming Back?" Timothy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess that is the big question with this announcement by Joe Biden. And let's start with that first. What were your thoughts when you saw Biden, you saw that clip?
I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I shouldn't have been, because he ran a very pro-union campaign. The Economic Policy Institute actually put together a very interesting video. I don't know if you've seen it, where they put together a bunch of things that Biden said on the campaign trail about unions. And it was really remarkable.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Timothy. I remember 2008. Barack Obama did the exact same thing. Barack Obama said we were going to get something better than the Employee Free Choice Act. He was going to be the most pro-union president ever. And my favorite line, I'm going to put comfortable shoes on and walk picket lines. None of that stuff happened. So, a lot of the campaign rhetoric, I was going, it's campaign rhetoric. The fact that on day one, by 5 o'clock, he changed the complexion of the NLRB. And here we are a little over a month down the road. He makes this statement, why I voted for him.
Right. He fired the general counsel at the NLRB, who was very anti-union. And he gave this statement about the Amazon organizing drive in Bessemer, Alabama. He didn't exactly say you should vote in the union, but I think everybody pretty much got the message. He all but said it. He doesn't want to formally intervene, and he emphasized, it's not up to me, but it sure as hell isn't up to your bosses. It's up to you. But he also talked so much about the virtue of unions that it was hard to miss that he was saying in between the lines, vote in the union. And that's extraordinary. I'm not sure a president has ever done that before.
Well, there's the supposedly FDR said that if he was a worker in a factory, he would join a union.
Right, but it's one thing saying I would join a union. It's another thing to say, here's this union election, here's how I think you should vote. Which, again, he didn't say explicitly, but he did say it implicitly.
No, and what I took from that is you're right. He didn't say explicitly, you do this. He said you should have the right to choose however you want. And don't let the fear and intimidation, supervisors don't harass. I mean, he went through that language. And to me, if I'm one of those folks, about to cast my ballot, I'm thinking, the federal government's got my back. Maybe there's somebody behind me that's not going to let me be hung out to dry, because I think if there are unfair labor practices, if Amazon does come down like a lot of union busting companies do, I think there will be, for the first time in a very long time, some retribution from the federal government.
The other thing that Biden said, which was hugely important, and I don't think I've ever heard a politician say it. I've heard union people say it a lot. He said, look, the National Labor Relations Act doesn't say join a union, don't join a union, we don't care. It says it is the policy of the United States to encourage collective bargaining because that aids commerce.
But that goes back to the original intent of the National Labor Relations Act, which I like to say.
It's still there in the statute.
Yep, it's still right there. The original intent was not to get, because there isn't in the original act, there isn't a line, there isn't a paragraph, there's not a word that gives employers rights. It's all giving employees, workers rights. because they understood the employer has all the rights. This was leveling the playing field. And again, over the last 70 plus years, the ossification of labor law has swung the pendulum back into the side of employers and away from we, the working people.
Right.
So in looking at this, in looking at what's going on in Alabama, then how do you see this shaking out? Because this has got to be a huge boost in the arm.
I don't know. I think it's a little risky because
it's Alabama.
It's Alabama, but it's Bessemer, Alabama. It's which is a Birmingham suburb, and Birmingham, Alabama is no stranger to labor activism. That's where the steel mills were. There are probably a few still left there. I haven't checked lately. One or two anyway. It's a pro-union region in a very anti-union state, in a right-to-work state. And I don't know whether workers will see it as encouragement or whether they'll see it as an imposition. I have to believe, though, that just because of the power of the bully pulpit, it's more likely to help rather than hurt.
So and I know you don't like to make predictions because I don't either, but how do you think it's going to go? Do you think at the end of the month you're going to see a victory? How do you see that playing out?
I really don't know, but I will say this. If it is a victory, it'll be a huge victory, personal victory for Biden, because certainly going in, all the betting was this is probably going to lose. And just because, past experience.
No, I mean, that was my thought from the beginning. I'm going, why would you choose, Bessemer, Alabama to make this big play, especially with a union as small as the retail workers? And I know they're backed by UFCW, but it seemed like they were setting themselves up for a loss. And I know you got to fight.
And Amazon was uniquely stupid in this fight by trying to bar mail-in voting. That's gotta have boomeranged on them, don't you think?
Absolutely. No, I mean, Amazon has done everything wrong in this. All of the harassment that I'm reading about, you can't even go to the bathroom without being assaulted by some kind of propaganda. They're doing the captive audience meetings. They're doing all the things that right out of the Union Buster playbook. That I got to tell you, if it's me, I'm repelling against, and I'm going to vote against you just because you put me through all that.
And the mail-in ballot. I mean, we're in the middle of a deadly pandemic. Are you really, and you're trying to persuade me that you're a benevolent employer and therefore I don't need a union, but you're insisting that I show up at this special polling place to cast my ballot when I should be spending as little time as possible on the premises, given the pandemic.
Yeah, it's crazy. But like you said, if this is a victory, it's going to be a huge one. Probably on the scale of GM from the old days, because this is the biggest employer. This is the nut to crack right now, because Amazon is right now at the point. And I keep telling my Teamster buddies, better figure out how to organize their drivers, because eventually we're going to end up with a gig economy driver system that's going to put UPS out of business. And I think folks are taking it seriously.
I think it's the most sort of politically significant union organizing vote since the vote in where was it? Was it in Georgia? The Volkswagen Tennessee in 2013, where politicians got involved in that one too, but they got involved on the pro-management side because these Republicans were terrified at the thought that the UAW would gain a foothold in their state.
This is, again, one of these moments where I'm glad to see it. Now, your piece on, and I thought it was fantastic, is organized labor coming back. You kind of took some swipes at the minimum wage increases that I've been arguing for a long time. Labor spends a lot of time saying we need to raise the minimum wage, as I keep saying we need to organize more people so that they do better than the minimum wage. Because you go through the kind of the history of it a little bit that I thought was important.
Well, I think look, I think raising the minimum wage is incredibly important. But what struck me I went back and looked at the votes, the House votes on the minimum wage, and also on the Jobs Act, which is this labor rights bill. very important labor rights bill that that Biden has endorsed. And there were actually more Republican votes for the labor rights bill in the House than for raising the minimum wage. Not a lot more, but a couple more. And that surprised me, because raising the minimum wage, over the last 70 years, it's become harder in the last 10, 15 years, but it hasn't been that big a deal. It's a very popular thing to do, and so the minimum wage has been raised a lot. Meanwhile, over that same period, organized labor has desperately been trying to get a labor rights bill passed ever since the 1947 Taft-Hartley Act, which rolled back labor rights, and I think was the biggest contributor to the decline of unions in the U.S. Relative to other nations,
and more importantly, the decline of the middle class. I mean, really the death of a prosperous working class.
It's the same, yeah. They're the same thing as far as I'm concerned, and labor has been struggling to try and pass a pro-labor bill, and it hasn't been able to do it. It wasn't even able to do it during the Johnson years, the sort of, kind of high noon for liberalism. But now, I think there is some hope that the PRO Act will pass. I don't think it's going to pass, tomorrow, but I think we'll probably see it pass in the next 2 or 3 years.
Wow, from your lips, we desperately need this, and I tell my Republican friends, the reality is you should be in favor of this. This is the meritocracy that you want. This is getting big government out of your lives. This is all of those things that you claim you want. This is workers, creating wealth, sharing in the wealth that they create. It's local bargaining, so you don't have some big overarching government telling you have to. This is what Republicans should be in favor of.
I absolutely agree. It always has mystified me that conservatives, anti-government conservatives, resist labor unions when they are an alternative to government regulation, it's focused at the ground level. It's all these things conservatives say they're in favor of, and it's not the government. It's just people in a workplace working out their differences, and they have the knowledge that the rest of us don't have. It's a very conservative way to approach regulating businesses.
Yeah, no, but here's the thing, and this is the question that I'm grappling with right now, because Republicans used to be, somewhat pro-labor. You go back to the Eisenhower years, promoting labor rights was in their platform. I know several former congressmen who were pro-labor Republicans. They were prevailing wage Republicans, which, find one of those today, other than Jim Justice, I guess now. So for me, this idea that it's possible, you think that we could get some kind of major legislation passed through to regain labor power is pretty important. In that I think the Republican Party is trying to reinvent themselves a little bit and take up on Trump's coattails and trying to reach out to those people. I'm curious your thought.
They are. They're trying to connect with the working class, and in order to have any lasting connection to the working class, they're going to have to address unions, and they're going to have to be pro-union. Their difficulty is that the guys who write the checks, the fundraisers for the Republican Party, are big business and wealthy individuals, and those are the people in America who really despise unions.
You're absolutely right.
Voters don't particularly. Voters are fine with unions. Polls always suggest. In fact, that they're kind of, I think, a majority, even of Republicans at this point. Republican voters support unions, but the money guys just loathe and despise unions.
Yeah, because I got friends who say, "Well, the unions all give money to Democrats." I'm going, yeah, because they don't have an option. The Republicans are trying to destroy them. There is only one island left, and that's the Democratic Party at this moment. Maybe if the Republicans weren't so crazy and weren't so vehemently opposed policy-wise, maybe you'd see some of that change.
Right, and I think as it is, something like 1 in 3 union members votes Republican. Right, it's close to that anyway. It always surprises me when I see it because the Republican Party is so so opposed to labor unions, but there are a lot of union guys who are Republicans.
Yeah, it comes down to the guns, though. The God, guns, and gays thing. I know a bunch of them. So let me last line of questioning, because I'm looking at this PRO Act, and you've kind of given me a little bit of hope, because I had Sarah Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants, on, who said it's dead on arrival this time around. So you're telling me it's possible, maybe down the road. That gives me some hope.
Yeah, I mean it's dead right now for sure. I don't want to, but I think if we see the Democrats pick up some seats in the House, and if they expand their majority in the Senate, it could happen.
I mean, this is one of those moments where I go back to my grandparents' generation, and the stories that my grandfather told me of organizing places and the things that they did and how the law was. That's what I would like to return to. I would like to return to the opportunity of workers to have their say, to be able to collectively bargain and return some of the things that built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization, the things that my grandparents' generation built.
Yep.
And we do that by giving people the ability to not have to go through what those workers in Alabama are going through. How long is this? How many months has this now been of constant attacks, of constant being berated? Like I said, can't even go to the bathroom without being assaulted by propaganda.
Well, one thing that's interesting about this group in Alabama is it's a relatively new plant, I think. So these are relatively new workers. They move towards unionization really quickly.
As all workers should. Look, I mean, this pandemic should have awakened a lot of us to the fact that evidently the employers don't care, because we didn't get the PPE. In fact,
right.
The place in Iowa, they were betting on how many people would get sick.
Right.
It's crazy. But I hope you're right. You've given me hope, and I appreciate that. Make sure you check out Timothy Noah's work. The latest piece is Organized Labor Coming Back. We'll get links out. Also, make sure you check out his book, The Great Divergence, America's Growing Inequality Crisis and What We Can Do About It. We'll get links out for that. Timothy, I appreciate the time. Love to have you back again sometime real soon.
Thanks so much.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Are you a trade union worker? Have you ever worked at a prevailing wage job site? Then today in labor history is an important day for you. The year was 1931. Congress passed the Davis-Bacon Act. This act required that any new construction or building or public works project of more than $2,000 that included federal funding must pay a prevailing wage. The legislation was named for the bill's architects, New York Republican Congressman Robert Bacon and Pennsylvania Republican Senator James Davis. The prevailing wage refers to a standard local wage. By maintaining a standard wage, this ensures that contractors could not win bids on federal projects by driving down labor costs or providing less than quality work. The goal was to protect the workers and ease the volatility of the construction industry. There have been criticisms of the law. At the law's passing, white workers dominated the construction trade unions. Prevailing wage laws ensured that construction bosses could not bring in cheaper, non-unionized black labor to underbid the union construction labor. This meant that many black workers effectively found themselves barred from federal construction projects. Like many of the gains made by labor at the time, the benefits were not equally distributed along lines of race and gender. Today, on an annual basis, roughly between 20% of all construction projects in the United States fall under the jurisdiction of the Davis-Bacon law. Unions also regularly organized to encourage private construction projects to honor these laws. Prevailing wage remains one of the most important legal protections for trade union labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
don't know if Nero really fiddled while Rome burned, but we know that Texas Senator Ted Cruz fiddled around while his state froze. While Ted fled Texas for the warmth of the Ritz-Carlton Resort in Cancun, Mexico, dozens of his constituents died in the 5-day deep freeze, and millions more suffered physically and financially. This disaster was not the result of a polar vortex, but of a small-minded vortex of right-wing political hokum that puts the interests of a few energy profiteers over the well-being of the people. Among Texans now paying the price of this political fealty to the corporate interests is a hard-hit group that gets little media notice: small local farmers. I've had the privilege of working with these hardy, innovative people since my days as Texas Agriculture Commissioner. They are America's most productive, most ecologically conscious, most community-spirited ag producers. Yet, state and national farm policies serve the industrial farm giants. For example, tens of billions of our tax dollars are paid out each year in crop insurance, but the program is not geared to the realities and needs of small, local, diversified farms, few of which get any assistance. Indeed, the bulk of payments go to those least in need, the big acreage, multi-million-dollar agribusiness operators, including Wall Street syndicates. So, such efficient enterprising farms in my area as Boggy Creek, Eden East, and Hatton Hart lost row after row of veggies to the killer storm. That means they lost the money invested to produce those crops, lost the money they would have gotten by selling them, and will have to find money from somewhere to put in a new crop. None of them will get a dime from the federal program. This is Jim Hightower saying, not only must we replace our corporate-controlled electric grid, but also our corporate-controlled ag policy and our corporate-controlled public officials. Grab a libation and join the conversation. It's the Lowdown Happy Hour at Hightower's Chat and Chew Cafe. Details and schedule at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So to follow up on Timothy Noah's piece, and he was talking about the minimum wage and how many times it had increased during the the 50s and the 60s, and how it accelerated as unions were under attack, and density was going down, and membership was being lost. The need to fight for a higher floor became part of the labor movement's struggle then. Before, it was never about the minimum. We wanted to do better. And this is where my mindset, I kind of have a very libertarian mindset in this, which is, I don't want government involved in the negotiations. I don't want them between the employer and the employee. I want them being the referee, making sure that everyone is on equal ground. And look, you're never going to be completely equal with the employer because they control the factors of production. What workers control is the ability to fold their arms and say no. And somewhere in there is a deal that can be struck. And this isn't radical. It isn't radical thought. It isn't extreme. It is what built the most prosperous economy in the history of the world for working people. You literally had the ability of a family to survive on one 40-hour paycheck. How many people can do that today? Honestly, truthfully, how many people can afford to buy a house, buy a car, take vacations, put their kids through college, save for retirement, and lead a dignified life on one 40-hour work week? On going through an entire year. And look, they didn't work a lot of overtime. There's some people who did, but for the most part, a 40-hour work week was it. That was the maximum. It was maximum. That was it. And every job that, and I'm thinking back to the conversations I had with some old timers. Every job, if you worked over 8 hours, you got overtime. And when I started working, every job that I worked, it was overtime after 8. That was the culture then. Now you've got people who go, well, you work 40 hours straight and not get overtime. We've allowed the standards that generation built to ensure that there's a reasonable life-work balance to be destroyed. And we gave it away for, well, at least we got a job. And as they continued to use the power of government to change the rules, horrible neoliberal trade policies, as they pushed Taft-Hartley and these idiotic right-to-work laws that guarantee no rights and no work, as they continued to swing the pendulum back into the hands of the well-to-do and the employer class, what you have is a more desperate working class. This is not new. This is not difficult to figure out. And I've spent a lot of time, trying to figure out how you undo what has been 40 years of programming that unions are bad, private benevolent corporations are good. And because, over the weekend we had an interesting conversation with Joe Walsh, Tea Party conservative from Illinois, former congressman. And surprisingly, there were some areas where we agreed that unions are needed. Unions are actually a good thing. His problem is, well, no one should have to join. And I say, you don't have to join a union. You don't. You can, one, go find somewhere else to work, or two, not join and pay for the representation that you get, which is a reduced amount from the dues. But you still got to pay for representation. You got to pay for the organizing, the negotiating, and the bargaining, and the enforcement of the contract. You got to do that. There are no free riders. And that's where the breakdown began. And I go, look, this is one of those moments where, the government is saying, because of these right to work laws, that you, a worker, and that employer cannot make a deal. You cannot come to an agreement. That from the beginning of your negotiations, because everyone likes to believe, I'm going to go make my deal. We hear this all the time. The door is wide open. Come in, we'll sit down and negotiate. The game's rigged from the start. Because you can't, from the start, you cannot agree on a closed shop. So immediately you're putting a divisive tactic right in the middle of your organizing. That's where my grandparents' generation, they were able to fight for and win the closed shop. Union recognition in a closed shop. Everybody who works there has to be a member of the union. They have to be a dues-paying member. And if you don't want to be a dues-paying member, you can go across the street and work for the company that might be non-union. That's your choice. But your choice shouldn't be able to make my conditions worse. And this is where that whole choice thing comes in. How should you get to have more power over a choice than I do? And this is one of those issues that, I'm with libertarians on. We don't want government involved. Stay out. Allow people to negotiate contracts that are going to make people's lives better. And you do that by ensuring that the rules of the game are equal. You cannot have a desperation class of working people who can't survive. Look, where are we now? What was the last numbers? 40% of the people can't come up with a $400 emergency. 60% of people can't come up with $1,000 in an emergency. We're talking a massive desperation class of working people. We're talking people who are hamsters on the wheel. And their ability to say, no, we're not going to work for poverty wages in desperate conditions is severely limited. And I look at right now. I'm hoping Timothy's piece is right. I hope we're on the brink of the next great organizing move, where people have looked at the treatment that they've gotten over the last year and look at the rhetoric that's come out about, oh, you're an essential worker. Oh, you're a hero. Didn't come with much bump and pay, still struggling to pay the bills. Didn't come with personal protection. Didn't come with the respect and the dignity of changing workplaces. And I think that's going to play a big part of what's going on in Bessemer, Alabama. It is going to be a big part of how that shakes out. So I've been on this spot of thinking, how is it we got here? You know, because when I was a kid, and I've been talking about this lately, when I was a kid, you saw it right in front of you. Union job equals better life. Simple. You know, the old Reagan thing, you know, the best anti-poverty program is a job. And I've amended that to being a union job with a livable wage, with health security, with retirement security, with job safety, and an end to at-will employment. I mean, that's one of the things that people don't even talk about anymore. And it came up yesterday. Well, it came up over the weekend, but I talked about it a little bit yesterday about this kid who had the audacity to make a suggestion to his employer, had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to say, hey, we think you should be doing things better. We think you should be doing more to clean the air, more to keep customers from not wearing masks and infecting us, doing more to ensure that our safety. And he was unceremoniously fired because they said, and they were very clear, your employment here is in an at-will status, can be terminated for any time, for any reason. That line right there should be on the mind of every working person, because that means you. And it's something I've always taken for granted. I've never had that weight on my shoulders. I've never had that moment where I go, you know, I'm going to go to work today and maybe I get fired because I wore the wrong color shoes. Maybe I brought pizza instead of a hamburger. And I'm going to get fired. Or maybe I wore an orange shirt. But millions of people across this country do. And you know, when I'm talking to people, that's in their mind. That they can't demand more. They don't feel they're able. And this is where the Republicans, and this is where the moneyed interests, and I shouldn't say Republicans, I should say the moneyed interests. This is where the wealth class fears a strong labor movement. The wealth class is afraid of an empowered workforce. The wealth class is afraid of us wanting and demanding better. You know, I think back to my grandfather and his generation, and the stories that they told were just, maybe someday over a beer. Maybe if I get drunk enough, I'll share some of them, because some of them were pretty salty. But they didn't take anything from anyone. They demanded a portion of the wealth that they created. They would have never. My grandfather's probably spinning in his grave over the fact that we have CEOs that make 300 plus times what the average worker makes. It's just remarkable. And it's something that they would have never fathomed. That you would have that kind of just unimaginable wealth in the hands of so few people. Now, look, they had rich people back then. Absolutely. The business owners, the shareholders, they were wealthy, but not like we've got today. And the power that wealth gives those employers is almost unmatched. I mean, think about the courage that it's going to have to take for those Amazon workers to go in and cast a ballot and say, yes, I want representation. Yes, I want to join with my coworkers, and I want a better workplace. I want better wages. I want better hours. I want better conditions. I want better opportunities, not just for myself, but for whoever takes this job after I leave. And we're going to do it against one of the most powerful corporations on the planet. Think about the constant berating that goes into this. And that underlying, you know what? We can always move the plant somewhere else. We can make your life miserable. We can do like we did to Chris Smalls in New York, and we can fire you and get away with it. That's why I think Joe Biden's statement was so important. To have him come out and say, you know what? I'm watching. I see you. I see what's going on. And if I see any of this stuff, that I'm going to be paying attention. That's why I think it was such an incredible moment to do it. Because it does take an act of courage to step up. I've done organizing campaigns before. I've been involved in organizing before. I know the struggle that these people go through. worrying about, are they going to be able to put food on the table? Are they going to be able to pay their rent? Are they going to be able to just make it to the next day without a paycheck? Are they able to find another job? Is this going to be a black stain that no employer will ever hire them again? I understand that, which is why we need a culture of workers who say, you know what? We're not going to work anywhere without a union. We're not going to work anywhere without a contract. And this is common sense to me, because good luck finding a CEO that doesn't have a contract. For me, it's that written down stuff. It's that, yeah, I agree to do this. You agree to do that. Yep. We have a contract. And you're not going to break your part. I'm not going to break my part. And if we have a problem, there's a machine. There's a way to figure that out. We set up a grievance machinery. We go to arbitration. We solve this without you going, you're fired. And I know we just went through a presidency of a guy who was famous for that. And I guess, on the American psyche, the fact that he rose to fame on that phrase, and that we took to it, that people actually weren't repulsed by some rich giant rectum saying you're fired. I'm still struggling with that, and how people are willing to, treason, to attack our Capitol for that guy. It's amazing to me. And I keep saying the people who are the most ardent Trump supporters are the people who are screwed over the deindustrialization of this country. They were the people who were shafted as the unions were broken and the wealth extracted from their communities, and all that they were given by our government were barely subsistent handouts. Which is why I'm against welfare programs. I'm against food stamps. I'm against all that stuff. I want jobs programs. I want union jobs programs. I want people to do better than the minimum. I want people to have the pride and the self-respect and the self-esteem to be able to say, you know what, I made it on my own. I didn't have to beg for a handout. I tell this story all the time. And I was 8 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. There was nothing more dehumanizing than having to take the clown money that came in the food stamp books to the store and have that woman behind the counter just humiliate me to no end. And I swore right there as 8 years old, I would never do this. I would never do this again. And no child, no adult, no human being should have to go through that. And it was all because, look, the 70s were not a good time for single mothers. Jobs were not available, and especially where we lived. We weren't on the bus line, so good luck even getting a job if we had a bus line. Which is why we need to have, as I've said from the beginning, a government that is the employer of last resort. If you really believe in competition, this is where I love my conservatives who love to argue, we want competition. You want competition? I'll give you competition. We have public sector jobs that take care of the needs of we the people. And those private sector jobs, if they want to attract those workers, they're going to have to pay them. And we have real competition, real choice. Not the kind of BS choice that we're thrown at and the kind of nonsense that they give us. The kind of crumbs that are left behind. But actual choices. But you're not going to hear that because, even the Republicans don't want to do away with welfare and food stamps because we need those desperate people to keep the middle class or the remnants of the middle class running on that hamster wheel because they don't want to be like those people. And then they look back at those people and go, well, you should be like me running on the hamster wheel you're about to croak. Instead of saying, hey, you shouldn't exist, so I don't have to do this. What happened to us as a society where we no longer aspire for everyone to do better? And that looking at someone else who's done pretty well, hey, you got health insurance? How do I get that? Hey, you've got a defined benefit pension? How do I get that? Hey, you've got safe working conditions? How do I get that? Well, I'll tell you how. You join a union. That's simple. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. National headlines spread fear of the growing wildcat strikes at Chrysler and Briggs auto plants in Detroit. The Wildcats had increased to 35,000 strikers and idled workers at 2 Chrysler plants and 7 Briggs plants. The strike wave started a week earlier at the Dodge main plant in Detroit. 8 of the union's best leaders had been discharged for refusing to go along with a production line speed-up. Briggs management followed Chrysler's union-busting campaign by firing 7 UAW officers at the Mack Avenue plant. 3 days later, Briggs fired another 8 committeemen and stewards, which then provoked the walkout. Company officials and the War Labor Board were outraged at the halt in war production of tanks, B-29 Super Fortresses, anti-aircraft guns, rockets, and trucks. The Michigan legislature introduced a bill to define as a felony any strike participation that violated a labor relations contract. The War Labor Board demanded that both sides meet in Washington to end the walkout. Strike leaders defied the wartime no-strike pledge and ignored the international's threat of disciplinary action. Strikers had the full backing of local UAW presidents. The UAW conceded that management had provoked the wildcatting through indiscriminate firings. Workers argued that if the War Labor Board prioritized production over union busting, they would order the reinstatement of all the discharged leaders. The Flint Labor Council passed a resolution demanding that all CIO and other union representatives resign immediately from the War Labor Board. It considered the board as stacked against labor. Workers at Chrysler and Briggs would soon end their walkout with guarantees of arbitration for reinstatement of the fired militants.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It's one of those stories that just makes you angry as all can be. Evidently, this guy, Terry Talley, a 63-year-old former factory worker, was just released from prison. 40 years he spent in prison for a crime he didn't commit. I can't imagine how angry that I would be. 1981, he was locked up in Georgia for a rape he didn't commit. DNA test in 2009 proved he didn't commit one of them. Now they say, well, he still had 3 more. He had life sentences until February 23rd. A judge exonerated him on the other 3 cases. But this is one of those things where you just go, 40 years this guy spent in jail with a crime he didn't commit. And this is why we desperately need criminal justice overhaul. We need major reform. And I'm sure that whoever the district attorney was, I'm sure that they made their bones and they moved along. And, I was looking at something in Philadelphia where they had gone through the number of people wrongfully convicted and just something seriously wrong with a system that broken. And I tell my kids this all the time: don't get involved with anything having to do with, you don't want to even interact with police at this point, because you get your name on the radar, it's trouble. We're in a weird kind of moment. But I feel for this guy. 40 years in prison. Wow. And, the police chief, the current police chief said, it's amazing that this guy got convicted on how weak the original evidence was against this guy. And now they have, a new person of interest. They now look back after years, decades, and now maybe they can find the person who really did it, which is just insane. Also, big news today. Governor Cuomo has apologized for acting in any way that may make a woman feel uncomfortable. He claims he's never touched anyone inappropriately. I don't know. I look at the photos. I look at what the stories are. I guess we're changing what harassment is at this point. He says he's not going to resign. And, the one story that I was looking at, the one story where, evidently, and look, there's got to be a full investigation, but if this is it, if this is the allegation, and understand this is a well-coordinated right-wing or operation to oust him. When they couldn't get him on whatever was going on in the nursing homes, this was next. They had this in the chamber. This was being decided and moved at a very interesting time. But here's the thing, I teach my son that, you ask permission. If the allegation is true that he asked the woman to kiss her, isn't that what we want? And then I got to ask my wife, did I sexually harass her when I asked her? I mean, she did put her head down and I missed the first time. But, I don't think I was harassing anyone. And so if this is the new standard, I kind of have problems. I just want the definitions. And this is another one of those moments where you go, do we go back and try and, hold people accountable for things that they did 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when the mores and the times were different? Because I started thinking about myself. How many girls over my lifetime have I asked to kiss? And is that gonna now? I better look out. Big trouble. Or those drunken college days where, look, I understand the power dynamic of sexual harassment, and I understand how that works. And how you're worried about your career, and how if someone does things to intimidate, I get that. I'm not getting this, and it's going to be interesting to see how the investigation goes forward and what they come out with. But we'll see. But good on him. I got to be honest. Good on him. I don't particularly like Governor Cuomo. I hope he doesn't rise to be the 2024 nominee for president. I don't want him in the White House. But the fact that he's not going to resign is the kind of Democrat that I want to see stand up for themselves. There are a lot of people are now with the regrets about Al Franken, which I said back then was stupid for him to resign. Do the investigation, take whatever punishment comes, but you don't resign. And now there are people going, oh, well, maybe that was a mistake. Look, I get holding people accountable. I get consequences for actions. I get that. But we can't continue to feed into the right-wing narratives and let something like this blow up, because this is, in my view, a right-wing plant. This is them pushing that narrative. You never see the Republicans ever resign like this, unless it's overwhelming evidence. What I've seen so far, not so much overwhelming. And I'm glad that the left didn't bite on the Dr. Seuss stuff either. Another right-wing spin. Look, are there books that have really disturbing things? Yes. And as I understand, the publisher decided 6 of those they're not going to publish anymore. I'm okay with that. Completely okay with that. The publisher made its choice, and they're not going to publish it anymore. I'm all right with that. I find it interesting that now we're hearing the frame from the right that this is Joe Biden's doing. Cancel culture. Joe Biden's canceling books. They're the book burners. I find it interesting coming from actual book burners. But going to be interesting to see how this all plays out in the coming days. I'm interested in the Cuomo thing. I'm hoping that the investigation is thorough. I'm hoping we get all of the information. And then, look, if he did actually do, something that rises to that level of harassment and intimidation and all of that stuff, then yes, he should be removed or resign. But from what I'm hearing so far, I'm not there. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Angry ones to the top, please. And you don't even have to write triggered in the email. I will assume everyone who does respond will be triggered. Quick break. Right back.
waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
As the bitter cold eases, the big problem now for many remains access to water.
Water crisis persists in Texas and Jackson, Mississippi, 2 weeks after winter storm. Latinos disproportionately exposed to worst water in U.S., new study finds. Plus,
this is a textbook example of this kind of information and influence campaign in operation.
As cities move to electrify buildings, the natural gas industry is striking back.
All of that news from the Empire and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I don't know about you, Trey, but my car doesn't run off fairy dust.
No, but your political ideology does, Senator Kennedy.
My car doesn't run off unicorn urine.
No, it runs off the same thing your campaigns do. Big oil. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, this storm in the South passed almost 2 weeks ago now, and yet folks are still paying the price for it?
Oh, yes, they are, sadly. As we go to air, in Texas, nearly 400,000 people across the state are still under boil water advisories, more than 2 weeks after that extreme winter storm pummeled large swaths of the South. Repairs for burst pipes and water mains are hampered due to a shortage of licensed plumbers and materials across the vast state.
I'd love to pummel large areas of the South at this point.
But getting much less attention is the full-blown water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. Residents there are entering their third week without water because the city's aging, underfunded water system was not built for such extreme storms. Much of the city has no water at all due to no water pressure, leaving many residents with no clean drinking water to bathe, cook, or even flush toilets. Officials don't know when the water will be restored and have mobilized water tankers to neighborhoods, but the most vulnerable residents can't reach them. The Daily Beast reports that the water outages have disproportionately affected predominantly black areas of the city. Jackson is just one of many municipal water systems around the country that are teetering on the edge of failure due to lack of funding for maintenance and upgrades.
You know, it's also the capital city of Mississippi. You would think they would want to take care of the people who live in their capital, but I guess too many of them are the wrong color.
And according to a new analysis, millions in the United States are drinking water from systems that violate limits for dangerous contaminants or fail to meet federal health standards, and Latinos are disproportionately exposed. That's according to a new analysis of Environmental Protection Agency data conducted by The Guardian of more than 140,000 public water systems across the U.S. The analysis found that counties that are 25% Latino or more violate drinking water contamination standards at twice the rate of predominantly white counties in the country.
Well, they should move.
The Biden administration is preparing another broad stimulus package to fund such long overdue repairs to U.S. infrastructure, but that's after the passage of the COVID relief bill. But Senate Republicans have indicated they will oppose it, like they opposed a similar $1 trillion infrastructure package just last year. Speaking of COVID, President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID rescue plan passed by the House on Friday with 0 Republican votes. It will provide $4.5 billion to the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which helps families afford utility bills, and it allocates $100 million to address health disparities from pollution and the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's if it passes the Senate.
Well, no wonder Republicans don't want to support it.
In other news, buildings are one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change. So Seattle, Washington, in February, joined a growing number of cities updating their building codes to ban polluting natural gas in some new building construction. However, as cities are taking action, the natural gas empire is striking back to maintain its dominance and its profits. The American Gas Association is battling growing attempts by municipalities across the country to electrify buildings, including launching influence campaigns with advertising and payouts to social media stars to promote natural gas, and lobbying state legislatures to pass preemption laws that block cities from banning natural gas.
'Cause freedom and small government government and all that.
Scientists say that electrifying buildings and switching away from natural gas reduces indoor air pollution. And the bottom line, it is also one of the most efficient ways to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 to combat climate change, according to Princeton energy researcher Aaron Mayfield, here in an interview with NPR.
We cannot continue using natural gas for things like heating and cooking because it's not consistent with reaching a net zero goal.
So there are more big battles ahead as the fossil fuel industry mobilizes to maintain its grip on the country.
And they are very good at maintaining that grip, at least until they can't any longer. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I already got the first angry email. You're mad. You're bad. Cuomo has to resign. I'm okay. That's your thought. I'm not seeing it. Not seeing it so far. I want some facts. But I do think it was wrong that Neera Tanden was out, and I took some heat for that as well. When we said that, I said that it's going to happen. She's going to have to withdraw. Do I agree with it? No. But the angry emails and comments came nonetheless. Anyway, we're here to share some thoughts on, and hopefully get me some more angry emails. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman, political analyst, to come share some thoughts and maybe tick up the angry, triggered emails. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. I think I can get you some tonight, and of course, then you know what I get on my Facebook account. You should have done 35 years, So I always get that, and that's from my cousins.
Since you brought that up, when we were talking the last time about Neera Tanden, and you just said, look, she's going to have to withdraw her nomination. It's going to have to happen because she's not going to pass. And it was very factual. It was this is what's going to happen, whether you like it or not. Don't care. And boy, the first thing out of this person's mouth, wow, he's a fraudster. I'm going, he's just telling you what's going to happen.
I get that all the time. They don't like what I say. They tell me I should have had bread and water and done 35 more years. So,
It's just crazy. But here's the thing: you were right.
She was gone, and again, I hate to say this, but I'm not sure that the Biden administration is crying about it. I'm serious. I mean, the Clintons leaned on the Biden administration. That happens. I'm not saying that's bad. It's life, American politics. And so they appointed her, that she was a choice of the Clintons. I mean, everybody knows that up on the Hill. And, she went. Joe Manchin didn't want her, and there was no use to fight it. I mean, what were they going to do? Make Joe Manchin, do that? Or were they going to go seek out some votes? Plus, she said things about Bernie Sanders. So people can say, well, it's a free country. Well, okay, fine. It was a free choice, too, of, Bernie's people not liking that.
But it is kind of interesting, though. You had a president who got into office saying really ugly, racist, horrible things on Twitter. And then this woman who, was rightfully mean. I mean, I didn't overly disagree with anything she had to say. But she gets booted to the curb.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think. Look, as far as qualifications, I don't think she's bad at all. I really don't. She said some things people do. Remember the voodoo comments by at the time Senator Harris wasn't sometimes kind with then Senator Biden, and she's the VP. George Bush voodoo economics, right? And he was this happens in American politics, but this one struck a nerve, and Senator Manchin decided it wasn't going to be, and no Republican was going to help the White House, and that ended it. And we saw it, you saw it, and it wasn't like a spiteful thing on your or my part. It's just
Just
the
what it
reality
was.
of what we knew,
Yeah.
what was on the Hill.
Now, on Manchin's part, I think it was absolutely spiteful because, she did go after his daughter for the whole drug price thing.
Yeah, the EpiPen or, whatever his daughter was involved with. Uh-huh.
Yeah, take it up with him, not me. So let's get into some more trouble. Cuomo says he's not resigning, not going to do it.
Well, I on your show, and you and I talked about Senator Franken, and I saw some Twitter feeds, and some of them coming from your listeners, and pointing out about the fact that he should have had his day in quote court, which was the Senate Ethics Committee that he asked for, and they, in fact, in one of the Cuomo articles, they quoted the whole Franken thing, that the Democratic side kind of learned a lesson off the fact that, they jumped so fast on Franken before giving him his day, which I argued about that with Franken, not of what he did or didn't do, but the fact that he wanted to go before the Ethics Committee and put it all out there, and see what happened. But with Cuomo, the same way, everybody's predicting he's gone, and yes, he might be, but now that there's this look by the AG, see what happens with it. It's not going to take the next year to do it, and then the cards will fall where they fall.
Yeah, I don't see Cuomo resigning.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I think he's a fighter. I'm not a fan of his, to be honest.
Right.
But I think he's not gonna back down.
Yeah, the only scenario that I thought the last time you and I talked on Monday that he would resign, I thought if there was a domino effect of, because we have one congresswoman from New York who said he ought to resign, Democrat, and if that dominoed and you've got 5 or 6 Democratic congressional members, then I think he's done. But that hasn't happened. It basically stopped with one.
Yeah, and even then, I still don't think he goes. And I think what happened to the governor of Virginia. There was all that call for him to resign. He's like, nope, not doing it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We'll see how this plays out. But the weird thing to me is, and this is what I keep struggling with. The biggest crime is, from what I've read, and I'm sure maybe you've read as much as I have, or probably more than I have, that he asked a woman to kiss her, and that's the big crime. And I'm going, isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
No,
right.
I guess you're not going there.
No, I don't know all the circumstances, of it, and I don't know what has he said about that incident, that alleged.
From what I've read, it didn't happen.
Okay. If he's saying that, and then that's not proven, then it's not going to be, the silver
we'll see.
nail.
Let's get out of this deep water. Throw me a raft. Evidently, the number of attacks, the reported threats to lawmakers up 93.5%, according to the Capitol Police. That's a pretty big deal.
Well, I think it is. Depends on the amount of. They have a threat protection section. It depends on the amount of the legitimate threats. Members have always gotten threats. I think they're probably more now than ever before. I'm not sure about this, how they reacted to this. March 4th, Trump becomes the 19th president. I'm sure you've seen all that.
Yep, stupid.
There's only 18 actual presidents. He becomes the 19th because of something secretly signed in 1870. I don't know, something like that. But I'm not sure that. I think they erred on the side of panic on this one. I just don't see the storming of the Capitol on that. And now they didn't pay attention to the first one, or somebody didn't react fast enough, and now all of a sudden, March the 4th. They're going to do this every time. At some point in time, if they're trying to storm the Capitol, people are trying to do that and are trying to go in and kill members of Congress, whether it's the vice president, the speaker, or a regular member, or staffers. I don't know. This is probably going to get me in a lot of trouble. Aren't there things called rubber bullets?
No, I say you shoot them.
Haven't they been used before? Why would they not have used? Why would they not use them? They've got. Okay, if the big deal is March the 4th and they think that a couple hundred people are going to do something. Line up the National Guard. They're over there anyway, and use rubber bullets and stop them. I think they should have had session, personally.
Yeah, I thought, when did we stop, when did we let the terrorists win?
Yeah, and the rumor mill. I think when I read that today, I was very disappointed with the House not continuing and having session.
So who makes that call?
That. Well, that would have been made by the Speaker's office and usually House Administration, the old committee I chaired. That's usually where it happens. When we were going to war with Iraq, the Sergeant of Arms, Bill Livingood, pulled me aside in West Virginia. I remember where we were, and he said, in about 10 minutes, we're going to be going into Iraq. Can I put the Capitol on an alert and stop everything, tours and things? And I said, sure. He said, well, 3 months. I said, 2 weeks. And then after that, I said, there's an incoming missile from Iraq. You can stop the tours.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to have, and I demanded tours.
Yeah.
And people said, somebody gets hurt in here, it's your fault. I said, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
What happened to we can't let the terrorists win? And where's Rick Santorum with his, Christo-fascism?
I had members that came to Steny Hoyer and I, the number 2 ranking current Democrat member, and he'd tell you this, came to us and said, Steny, we want you and Bob to wall in the entire gallery and forbid people to be in here. And Steny and I said, no. And they said, if something happens, you two are at fault. And we said, okay. I mean, it's not that we threw caution to the wind, but there were people who wanted a wall all around the Capitol. They wanted a wall at that time. They wanted the plexiglass interior. They wanted the Capitol shut down to people, kids, tours.
Crazy. And I'm against it now. I'm against the giant walls and fences. I'm against all of that.
Right. I was then, and I would be now if I was back there.
So if you're a representative right now and she shut everything down, what do you do?
I would complain about it. I don't care who it was. I did it when the Republicans ran the place. I complained. Hastert, his lawyer Ted Vandermeed, he's passed away now. He would call screaming at me. You're going to cost the Speaker his job. No, I'm not.
He's going to cost himself his job.
I would go see the Speaker personally, and I would say, you've always told me security, but safety and openness, and not fear. And then he would agree with me, and we would go about our business.
Yeah. No, I think it's a bad decision.
Yeah, terrible, I think, really.
And another one of those things where I just go, shake my head and go, this is why the Democrats
and it may
always
sound
look
harsh,
weak.
But that's why they shoot rubber bullets at other protesters, don't they?
Yeah, well, I'm in favor of shooting them with real bullets. If you're gonna come with the intention of overthrowing our government, sorry.
Well, I actually was asked by 3 people today at a work site about that, and I said, well, if I respect human life, but if a few people were shot in the beginning of that and were coming in threatening to kill members and were shot at the beginning, it probably would have stopped.
Yep. No, that's where I'm at. Look, you don't go storming anything like that. You don't go kicking in windows and, sorry. Where's the good guy with a gun?
The speaker and the vice president are. They want to hang him.
Yeah, crazy. Crazy times.
And by the way, I hope I'm very disappointed when I see that that there's the enforcement and Justice Department starting to say, well, some of them we can't prosecute every one of them.
Every one of them.
Every single one of them. Throw the book at them. This is beyond somebody even assaulting someone in the street. They tried to go in as an insurrection and also to kill people.
Yep. No, this is draconian. I'm willing to go old school here.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right, I'm with you.
But the thing is, today you had the hearing where the Major General said, somewhere between we weren't allowed to and the slow chain of command of, hey, the optics would look bad. We found out that the National Guard didn't get called out for 3 hours and 19 minutes.
Well, I think the optics ended up looking really bad. And I know somebody had said in the decision-making they were worried about optics. I don't understand why. We've used troops before. We'll use them again at some point in time. But with what we knew, it should have happened in full force. And again, I'm against closing it March the 4th.
I'm dead set against it. Let's move along. Elaine Chao back in the news. Evidently, possibly a criminal prosecution of her?
Well, this one's juicy. The U.S. Transportation Department's Inspector General, and I do want to make this clear for listeners, in general, for the most part, these inspector generals are above politics. I mean, most of the time, all right? And so anybody said, well, this is political. Well, not really. And the inspector general said it twice asked the Justice Department under Trump to investigate Elaine Chao. And the Department of Justice declined both times. And I'm sitting here wondering, did Mitch McConnell wait, kind of gave a break, obviously, the whole impeachment thing, and then took off on Trump after Trump was out because of his wife, Elaine Chao, his wife, who, is connected to a great big Chinese, very rich, powerful family.
Yeah, the Foremost Group is the name of the family shipping company, and they're enormous. Now, all the reports are, Mitch and Elaine Chao don't have any interest there, except they do. It's it's her family's money and her family's industry, and again, just the fact that there's that appearance of impropriety. She should have never been in that position.
Well, she also. They're saying that she had the Department of Transportation's Public Affairs Office help market her father's biography, and they are on record, and this is electronic and can be proven, editing his entry on Wikipedia. Employees of the federal government. I mean, it's not every day that transportation employees edit the person in charge's father's Wikipedia page.
Jeez. So why did they cancel her trip to China?
Well, I imagine because it just probably became too hot.
Yeah, I'm hoping there's an investigation. I would like to know. And I remember when they nominated her, I go, this isn't going to end well for her.
No, of course not. And but again, I'm just wondering now if he was silent, kind of sent messages to the White House, and then after Trump was gone, then he gave his speech. When it was, too late. When
there's no chance of her going to jail, and I still hope there is, because I want to see people from this administration in pinstripes, and not playing for the Yankees either. A new report out by the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. Evidently, our Air Force, they claim in this new report, wasted $549 million on Italian-made cargo planes. That they bought for the Afghan government that evidently, we did back in 2008. They bought 20 of them. And I guess we scrapped them in 2014 and we got 40 grand a piece for them, or 40 grand for the whole lot of the scrap metal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this one doesn't surprise me. I mean, let's go back to the name Bremer, which
there's a blow from the past.
Yeah, sure. And people are probably going, who's Bremer?
Paul Bremer.
Bremer was the governor of Iraq, okay? American governor of Iraq, technically for a while. And what was lost there? $2 billion misplaced in cash?
No, I thought it was $8 billion.
Okay, 2, 8, 6, whatever it was. But it was, you're right, it was up there in the billions. And, nothing, where'd the money go? In cash. I mean, there's so much waste that that's why when the Pentagon used to come over and say we need this toy and that toy, you need to support the troops when they're obviously especially active, but that doesn't mean they need all these things that they doesn't benefit a troop when they do what they do with it.
No, it's crazy, and I since you brought his name up, made me think back to how much more of this stuff are these reports that are out there. Because we went into that place for the graft, man, and there's tons of these stories of how badly we've mismanaged the American pocketbook, and nobody's being held responsible for it. Well, Bremer especially not.
Bremer was the worst in Iraq, and now these planes, and then we sat in the American embassy. We were the first group in. I was with Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, Dave Hobson of Ohio, Paul Kanjorski, Paul from Pennsylvania. And we sat there, and Dave Hobson asked a question, Congressman Hobson did, of Khalilzad, who was the temporary ambassador in our embassy in Afghanistan. And I smiled and I laughed, and Calazar looked at me and I answered it. Dave said, why are we not burning the opium fields? And I looked at it and I said, they won't be burnt. And Calazar couldn't. I said, they're not going to be burnt.
Nope.
The warlords control them. It's in there. They're not going to be burnt. And sure enough, 25 years later, they don't burn them.
And we've got an opioid addiction crisis here in the country.
Big time. And they don't they don't, because at that time the president of Afghanistan would have been assassinated in 4.5 minutes.
Yep.
And that's because the guy would smoke a cigarette. He could have got him in a minute. So, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and questions that never are probed or answered. Why didn't the media continue to focus on these things?
I wish someone would write the book of all of that whole tale. That's the book you got to figure out how to write.
That's true. That's true. It's the unspoken story of that whole region.
Just insane. But just the amount of money is just crazy to me. But Bob,
Terrible.
I appreciate the time and the thoughts. As always, good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. I mean, I look at those numbers and you go, holy, you know what? $549 million. We got 40 grand out of it. What could we have done with $549 million here? What kind of improvements could we have made? And look, and now I'm remembering Paul Bremer was the head of the provisional authority there, and they literally lost pallets of money. And you got to wonder how much of that maybe didn't even get on the plane. And yet we can't raise the minimum wage. We can't get people $2,000. We can't do any kind of sustaining, stimulus checks to get us through this. They can't do it. But when it comes to war, when it comes to blowing stuff up, boy, we're right on. Right on. Crazy, crazy stuff. And finally, Jim Jordan, the Ohio congressman, evidently he's facing some campaign finance questions. A couple of accounting, they're saying discrepancies. And this is one of those things when they start throwing this stuff out where there's some reporting discrepancies. I start thinking about Duncan Hunter and his wife basically throwing him under the bus, and good for her. I got to wonder how Jim's marriage is going right now. If maybe we find him locked up somewhere because, well, hell hath no fury. But they're saying there was an increase in disbursements totaling $122,000 on his 2018 post-general election report. And I guess a decrease in disbursements totaling $130,000 on their income and expense the final week of the campaign. So they're looking in that. They said that many of the discrepancies were in the $100,000 range. They said $900,000. I'm going, this is a congressman. This is a congressional race. What are you doing with multiple discrepancies of $100,000 and one of $900,000? This, again, is another reason why we got to go back and undo all of the insane Supreme Court decisions that have made money speech and money people and allowed the wealthy of this country to buy our Jim Jordans and our politicians. It's just crazy. The amount of money that goes into this is just crazy, especially at a time where, average everyday working people are struggling just to make it till tomorrow. And I'm hoping. I have great hope. As I said, I'm thrilled that Joe Biden is in the White House right now. I think he's going to lead us in a good direction, and I'm hoping Tim Noah is right. I'm hoping labor legislation that will help us expand the middle class and reward work. I'm hoping he's on it. I am hoping he is on it. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Looking forward to tomorrow. Our good friend Sarah Burris back. I'll get some thoughts on the big news over at Raw Story. Lots and lots to get to. Don't miss it. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@therick